And don't get me wrong, I highly recommend spreadsheets for a lot of stuff, but they're not fun. They're not interactive. You don't get excited about going in there at the beginning of the day and getting your work done and thinking that you've got this cool little tool to work with.
Welcome everybody to another episode of How To with Pixie and XU magazine. I'm delighted today to be joined by Kellie Parks. Kellie, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. Best of luck with this session, Jordan.
Thank you very much. So the topic that we're going to be discussing today is why UI matters when choosing new technology. But before we jump into that, do you want to give us all a very quick intro to who you are and what you do?
So I'm a bookkeeper here in Canada, and I work strictly in cloud technology. I am a trainer writer with Intuit, contracted. I don't work for Intuit. I have my own bookkeeping business. It's called Clearwater Cloud Accounting. I think I already mentioned that. And then I also do consulting with accounting professionals on accounting applications, cloud accounting applications, workflow, practice management, basically how to get your act together and not be a scrambled mess trying to get your work done in the cloud. And I've been cloud-based since 2012, and the work for home gig for me has been over 10 years now. So I'm pretty versed in some of this technology.
Nice.
Oh, and I'm Canadian. I'm in Canada.
Awesome. And I guess UI is a big part of the work that you do, especially with some of the vendors. So why don't we start by defining what exactly is UI so for the accountants that are listening?
Okay, so there's two kind of components to how you interact with an application. So one of them is UX, and that essentially means user experience, how it's built, how it's frameworked. I can't remember if that would include some of the colors, but the basic skeleton of how the user is going to interact with the product. And then UI is the user interface. So that is more in the weeds of how does it present to the user? How do you go find a button? How does it look? So I guess that would be more the colors. So the UX is more, well, they call it wireframing. And then the elements to create user flow, and UI is how you feel using in it, how it appeals to you visually, where the buttons and the pages and the screens and how they interact with each other as well. So it's, yeah, it's pretty key to working, to choosing a piece of technology for sure.
Okay, and we're going to come into why UI matters a little bit later on in terms of for accountants choosing technology. But first of all, when it comes to picking a new app to use in your firm, whether that's practice management, workflow, invoice automation, whatever it is,
right?
What should the approach be for choosing an app? Because I know that you recommend like a checklist approach.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we're in the accounting world. We love checklists, right? So first of all, you need to have a checklist on why on earth you need another piece of technology, especially right now with, there's a lot of people with app overwhelm. And you know what? Some days my head spins. There's so much great technology out there. And then there's just some junk that somebody thinks that they can hop on the bandwagon, right? And so first, you need to decide why on earth you need yet another piece of technology. What problem is it going to solve for you? What stumbling blocks do you have? What efficiency is a big one. What efficiency is going to create in your business? Because if it's actually going to detract from your efficiency, turn around and walk away, right? I call it SaaS, shiny app attention syndrome. Yeah. So people are always looking at the newest, greatest, the next piece of technology that somebody else says they love, but they don't stop and say, well, do I even need another piece? Do I have a problem that this thing is going to solve, or is it just going to complicate my life? So, you know, you need to make a list. So some of those problems might be email overwhelm. It might be keeping clients on track with their tasks. Do you have some missed deadlines? Consistency at work, that's a big one. Not having your, you know, file to file, client to client, day to day, your work being different, because in the accounting profession, consistency is the king for us for outcomes. Also, what outcomes do you want? Like, what kind of client outcomes are you trying to achieve? What kind of business outcomes are you trying to achieve for yourself? And then once you've decided what your problems are or what efficiencies you'd like to see created, what outcomes you want to have, then you need to vet the applications for you need to name the features that you want first. What's going to create those outcomes? What's going to solve those problems? So is email integration going to be one? Is auto nag reminders going to be one? Is reporting going to be a big one? Let's say you've got team and you need to know where everybody's at.
Yeah.
Is it workflow and task management, or is it automation that you need done? So what are the features that's going to achieve the outcomes you're after?
Okay. And once they've got clarity on what that checklist looks like and they're aware of the features that they need, what do they do next? Well,
first, I should take one step back. And I think you need to be very clear about what shiny, when you're first trying to decide on the next new piece of technology or replacing a piece of technology, is what fun, shiny features do you need versus what shiny features do you want? So be very clear, need versus want. We all want lots of things, but they may not actually contribute to the outcomes we're after, right? Okay. They may just, again, be a distraction. So then what was your question? See, I warned you.
So once they've figured out what it is that they actually need versus want, what is the next step in terms of evaluating those apps?
Then define. So I think what I would do then is like take a list of what kind of apps is that going to be. Is it going to be a practice management app? Is it going to be strictly a workflow app? Are you going to need an accounting program? What is it? What vertical, we'll call it, of application do you need? And are you comfortable tying a few applications together with Integromat or Zapier or any of these kinds of things that get the apps to play nicely together? Or do you want one app that contains a whole host of features for you? Are you comfortable with app underwhelm? Are you a minimalist? Or are you one of those people that likes to have all kinds of them? Identify what that's going to be next, and then pick, I would say at the most, half a dozen of them that are going to suit those features the most. Don't look at 100 of them. There's a ton of great applications out there. Which one is going to fill your feature need list the most? Pick a few and then start to vet those few.
Great. And then when you vet them, you're just essentially ticking them off against your feature list and your need list just for suitability.
Right. And there's a ton of spreadsheets out there or comparison charts that can do that, right? Like I have one. You guys are on it, of course, because I think your app is the bomb. And so Pixie's on it with a whole list of what it does and what problems it's going to solve. I think we've sorted that list into a few different sheets where it shows what the problems are it's going to solve versus just straight up what the features are. So make yourself, if you don't find a spreadsheet that you want, you've already listed out what the features are that you want. So then, and what problems you're going to solve, then start vetting the apps to find the top few that are going to do that and put them in a spreadsheet as well, if you will.
Cool. Okay. So linking this back to like the initial point of the conversation, which is UI, in terms of this conversation around choosing technology, why does UI matter so much?
It's huge. Now, I'm full disclosure, I'm super visual. I like things to, I like them to be pretty. Don't we all a little bit? I like them to maybe have a little fun element to them. And so being super visual, I want, it's become so key to me. Where are the buttons? What are the colors? How can I sort things? How much control can I have of an application is really important to me. So that comes to sort and filters, a lot of those kinds of things. But just to give you an example, so I not only do I consult with accounting firms to kind of, drag themselves out of 1990, I actually do some work with some firms in terms of being a bookkeeper. And one of the ones that I was working with, they had an application that it ticked off a lot of the boxes. It had a lot of the features that they wanted. They couldn't get anybody to use it though. So instead of working their way through, let's say, a job and ticking off what the work that had been done so that the manager knew where all the work was, they ticked it off when all of the work was done. So they couldn't really successfully track what anybody was doing and who was next in the lineup and plan their work because nobody actually liked using it. So I guess getting your team involved in the UI UX would be super key if you've got a team as well, because it's completely useless to have one of these products if people don't actually like working in it. And it's not just a matter of understanding it and being intimidated. That comes with training them and educating them. Everybody in the firm knew how to use this product. It was relatively simple. They just didn't because they didn't like it.
Okay. So is it worth getting the team involved early on in the vetting process when you're doing that evaluation of half a dozen apps to get them on the trials, get them on the demos so that they can get a feel for it as well?
Absolutely. And you know what? Get your cheerleaders going. So I worked with a firm that actually decided that they would get the least resistant ones in on the process. Well, you can imagine how that process dragged out then. They didn't want to adopt a cloud workflow application. So they dragged their heels on it and hated everything. So get a few cheerleaders involved, get the enthusiasm going first. But if you think you can vet this as an island, then that's also going to be a non-starter.
Yeah. I think as well, the team often spot things that you don't. Like I've done a few Pixie demos to like the entire team where I've done one to the practice owner initially and they love it. They think it's great. And then you do one to the team and they'll soon find reasons why it might not suit their ways of working. They're like, oh, does it do this or does it do that? And yeah. I think they have certain elements of visibility that the practice owner maybe doesn't have always.
Yeah, sure. Because they're all doing different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what the team uses for the example that I gave of where the owner of the firm had no idea of where the work was, that's what mattered the most to him. But he wasn't actually going to go in, so he didn't get it that they didn't like it because he didn't have to go in and open it up and play in it. He just needed to look at the high level, who was next and when that was going to come to him. So yeah, who's using it and how they're using it is going to be key. You can't just vet it as one person and then, come in like the high and mighty and say, here you go, here's what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm not sure many firms work like that now anymore though.
No.
I hope not, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. So in terms of evaluating UI, it feels like it's quite a fluffy kind of thing to try and evaluate. Like this is maybe individual preference more than an actual thing. So like, do you have any tips for firms when it comes to evaluating the UI of a product before they start to implement it?
Sure. Actually, it seems fluffy, but it's not fluffy. So if you want to take it straight back to efficiency, so if a product doesn't have great UX, but especially great UI, and it takes too long to click through to certain actions, or it's not natural. So if the buttons should be on the right, but they're on the left, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's going to decrease efficiency in it. It's also going to decrease confidence. Because if an app isn't kind of naturally positioned to where the next action should happen, it makes the user insecure in it a little bit. It makes them feel like a dummy.
Yeah.
But if you don't make it obvious how it should work, and I've seen some applications, and the rollout is going to be tough because they're built, well, first of all, they're awkward. You don't want an app to be awkward. And secondly, you said fluffy. Ugly comes to mind too. If you don't, we could all work in Excel probably for the rest of our lives and create and don't get me wrong, I highly recommend spreadsheets for a lot of stuff. And I recommend you start building out workflows in spreadsheets because then you can basically upload or copy and paste and we're comfortable in them.
Yeah,
but they're not fun. They're not interactive. You don't get excited about going in there at the beginning of the day and getting your work done and thinking that you've got this cool little tool to work with. So it's okay for a tool to be cool.
Definitely. Okay. slightly off tangent question.
That's my specialty. Wait, let me get the bell out in case you go way. Oh, I'm missing my bell because I do have a bell for when somebody. So if you start to go off topic, I get to bring you back. But go ahead.
Cool. In your experience, obviously you've seen a lot of apps in the accounting space. Can you name some of the apps that you think have got like really good UI and really nail this kind of user experience? Just so that people can go away and take a look at them and say, okay, that's a nice example of UI compared to maybe something else. You don't have to say Pixie.
No, you said accounting ones. So I was actually going to go to the accounting space. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The way that I function, right? And so one of my pet apps is actually a backup app. That doesn't sound particularly sexy, but it's an important one to me. But the UI of a product called Rewind is amazing. And a lot of what it does is the same as QuickBooks Online does in terms of audit trail and stuff. But the audit trail just makes much more sense to me. So I use Rewind for the audit trail before I even bother with the audit trail for QuickBooks Online. So that's a good example. It's a better layout, and you can also, I mean, this is just getting totally nerdy. You can go right down to source code if you want.
Okay.
Which can be a useful thing, but I just went way over. I did. So I'm apparently a professional at overwhelm. So taking it one step too far and overwhelming somebody. So at any rate, that's a really good one. Now, this is an interesting one. I use day in and day out Receipt Bank. And there are some things I really like about their UI. Their UX is fantastic. But some days I find myself struggling a little bit in the UI of it. Whereas HubDoc no longer has all of the features that I need rolled into one application. My client base has evolved into needing expense reports and having a lot of documents that need to be published. So Receipt Bank suits my feature need list more. But the clients that I can keep on HubDoc, I have because I really like the UI. I can click through more naturally on it, and it just feels more comfortable to me. Yeah.
You mentioned there that Receipt Bank meets your feature list, whereas HubDoc is more UI. So
yeah, I know, right?
How do you find the right balance of like, it meets all my, let's say there was an application, it meets all your features, but the UI is just ugly and looks clunky and looks hard to use, versus something that maybe has half the features but looks like beautiful and it's so easy to click from one place to the next. Like, where do you find the happy medium?
Actually, I guess Receipt Bank, HubDoc are a bit of a good example right now. If it has 75% of the features that you want and it's got a great UX UI, go with it. Most of them are developing features, or you can add on a few other apps. Like, let's say it doesn't have time tracking, but you really like the UI and it's easy to add on time tracking, or maybe another one of your applications has it, go with UI. If it's got less than 75% of the features that you want, it would have to be a stunningly beautiful app to use.
I think something to consider as well is like, from the app's perspective, it's very easy to add new features, but it's a lot harder to change the layout and the flow and the structure of the app. Yeah. So if an app typically has like a really bad like build and is like terrible UI, it's going to be like, they're going to have to do a complete transformation to turn that around into something that has beautiful UI. Whereas if it's kind of only got 50% of the features, but really great UI, the chances are they're probably going to add more features in over the next few months and years. So that might be a safer bet if you can make do with it in the time being.
I totally agree. And you know what? I'll give you a good example. And these are both applications that I really love. It's FreshBooks and QuickBooks Online. And so I have a few clients that they could use strictly QuickBooks Online, but they like the UI of FreshBooks so much, they're not budging. And these are not the creative crowd. Now, the creative crowd, you're going to have a really hard time because UI matters to them so much. They're so visual, right? that it would be hard to move a creative off of FreshBooks, even though they may be using QuickBooks in tandem. So that's a really good example of where, so they're only invoicing out of FreshBooks. They could invoice out of QuickBooks, but they're not going to, because the UI, they don't like it. So they have me do the accounting in QuickBooks, and they're doing their own invoicing out of FreshBooks rather than even listening to my suggestions of moving to a single app.
Yeah. Just picking up on something you said there, which is about like creative and non-creative people. Like UI sounds like it's something for the creative person, but I know in my experience, Pixie, like where I've demoed Pixie to what is very much a stereotypical accountant, if you can picture one. And they're kind of like, it's visually great, and you would never expect them to say that kind of thing.
Yeah. Can I tell you why I think that is?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I know a few workflow apps were designed to basically look like spreadsheets because they felt that accounting professionals would be more comfortable then. But I think accountants, we need to have a little fun sometimes too. So I think if you're going to get people to adopt cloud technology, you don't necessarily want it to be as static as desktop technology, and UI is part of that thing that makes it feel not static. It has movement, it has flow, you're interacting with it. And at first that may seem a little intimidating. You know, everybody's like, I don't want to give up my QuickBooks desktop. And because the UI is so different in QuickBooks Online. But as we start to adopt cloud technology, I think we more and more expect it to interact with us. And that's what UI does, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of time, so it's kind of like round this episode off. What would you say are the 3 to 5 big takeaways for people listening to take away from this episode when looking at and evaluating new apps and new technology?
Okay, so number 1, make a list of what the problems and the efficiencies and the outcomes that you want to create in your firm. So create a list of the problems, create a list of the outcomes, and that includes your client experience. What do you want your client experience to be? How do you want them to feel about you? Because now you're interacting in all this cloud technology with them. It's, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, we're remote, we're cloud, we're never going to see our clients again. That's so the opposite. It is so different. You are so collaborative with your clients. So what do you want that client experience to feel like? What's that outcome for your client going to be? What's the efficiency you want to create in your firm? And what's the problems that you're having right now? Then create a list of the features that are going to solve those outcomes or solve those problems. Create the outcomes, solve the problems. Create a list of those features, get them on down. Perhaps even start to map out the order of events that you would get stuff done, like what a basic workflow is going to look like, because you're going to need it to marry up to one of these workflow applications. And then vet the applications, and then go in and do whatever you need to do in a trial account. Some of them have demo accounts. Go in there and actually push some buttons. The world isn't going to end. You are not going to blow up the technology. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, I'm going to break it. No, you're not. So go in there, and I actually have a girlfriend who tries to break the apps to see how far she can push them, right? You're not going to blow up anything by playing, especially in a trial account. Just make sure you make a test account, like get a guinea pig account to send things to. Don't send it to a live client, right? Don't do that. That's the only thing, unless it's a client you're super close to and you don't care that you send them incorrect communications.
Yeah.
So set yourself, so that, I guess that would be another takeaway. In all of these applications, test the heck out of it, not with a client. And then the final thing that maybe doesn't relate to this is systemizing and getting processes in a UI that you love comes way ahead of automating anything. Way ahead. And then testing comes way ahead of automating anything. That's where your efficiency is going to come from.
Definitely. And that kind of mirrors what Ryan Lazanis said in an episode that I recorded with him recently as well. Get the systems and processes nailed first before you even worry about automation.
Yeah, actually, Ryan and I definitely agree. Well, I agree with Ryan on so many things. We definitely think alike. And People are way too quickly looking for things that they can automate when they have not systemized their process, and they are underestimating how much systemizing will create efficiency and will create beautiful outcomes.
Definitely. Okay. Look, this has been really useful, Kellie. Thank you. If anyone's got any questions for you, where should they go? What should they do?
You can find me at, there's a Facebook group. I know it makes your face melt off, but my group has filled with wonderful members. And so that is the Workflow Watering Hole. It's a Facebook group. And you can always find me at calmwaters.ca. That's C-A-L-M, calm as in calm, calmwaters.ca. And that leads to all of, like, that's my bookkeeping one. And then that will lead to, I do a coaching for accounting professionals and all of that. That'll just take you through.
Perfect. All right. Thanks a lot for your time.
Oh, it was great fun. Thank you for having me, George.